Continue our series on the Sermon on the Mount, and those of you who have been here won't mind if I review just briefly where we've been and what we've been covering. The Sermon on the Mount obviously is not a sermon in and of itself. No preacher could get by just reading it through, because it's a whole series of individual things put together, probably over a long period of time. It might even be better called sermons of Jesus, or collected sermons, or collected sayings of Jesus, for there are short little pieces that are glued together by the fact they're placed side by side. Was the sermon entitled or intended only for the disciples? We don't know. For in the opening chapters of the Gospel of Matthew, the 5th chapter, we suddenly find Jesus calling his disciples together, and we're not sure whether the crowds were there or not. Our interpretation has been that this is not a sermon which is meant for some time in the far future, but is to be lived right now, and that the power of the joy and the happiness of the Beatitudes, blessed are, happy are, ecstatic are, is a challenge to each and every one of us in our own lives to find God actively working through our lives. One of the great problems that we have is that we find meaningless so often in what we do. And what we do becomes meaningless, we begin to fall away. Without direction, without goals, without outreach, without service, without a whole host of things, each one of us retreats into themselves and begins to die. Last Monday, you'll forgive me if I make a personal reference, I was over at the Beaumont Hospital area to see my doctor. I went in with great confidence, as I always do, my eye doctor, and if he had seen me when I was scheduled to go in, I would have accomplished much more that day. But I sat there, and I sat there, and I sat there, and I sat there. And an hour and a half after my appointment, I was called to the inner office, and I sat, and I sat, and I sat. I couldn't get angry because he'd taken time for me, and all of you who have gone to good doctors recognize that times they have to shift their priorities towards the real need. But finally he walked in and looked up and said, "Oh, the happy wanderer." I said, "Not the happy wanderer, the unhappy non-wanderer." He said, "What happened?" I said, "I didn't get to go anywhere this year, no trip." And he stopped in the doorway, and the significance of what he said did not hit me until I was driving home. He said, "Jim, do not ever let that happen to you again." And I said to him, "Why?" He said, "Because if you do, you'll begin to die." Now what he was saying is a profound truth. Each and every one of us needs goals, directions, something that keeps us outside of ourselves. Traveling happens to be part of it for me, but each one of you has your own goals and your own directions, and if you set them aside and lose sight of what you want to become, you begin to die. You begin to fall away, and the challenge of Jesus' attitude is do not lose sight of the important goals of life. And the goals of life are always spelled out in service of others. Reaching out. So consequently, you find the Beatitudes that you've got the peacemakers, you've got the forgiving and the merciful, the Red Cross types. You've got people who are at peace with themselves. And we defined, in a way that many of you have found most interesting, blessed are the meek, happy are the meek, ecstatic are the meek, by picking the French phrase, debonair, calm, ones who are at peace within themselves, those who have shibumi, that ability to know that what they are is right for them and stand no matter what happens against them with certain peace and calm. The joys and the happiness are not the joys and the happiness that are to be seen on so much of our television screens or in our newspapers or in our movies. The joys and the happiness are the quiet reaching for goals and service. And one of the things we need to recognize is that as people move along in years and their age increases, it does not change in any manner, shape, or form the need for goals and direction. And that one of the things that happens very often at retirement, people are amazed that somebody suddenly, following retirement after 50 years of hard work, collapses and falls away physically. The reason is very simply, all of the goals and direction has been stripped, and there's a slowing down process. And the one of the things that happens very often at retirement, people are amazed that somebody suddenly, following retirement after 50 years of hard work, collapses and falls away physically. The reason is very simply, all of the goals and direction has been stripped, and there's a slowing down process. Each and every one of us as parents, each and every one of us as children, need to recognize that we have to challenge each other to keep those goals, those dreams, those happinesses, those things alive. The power of the Beatitudes is to say that ultimately happiness is found at that point. Well, get the Bibles out. That's sort of just to catch you up a little bit. Turn to the 5th chapter of Matthew. And we're going to move on past the Beatitudes. 13th verse. You have the Bible up here for everybody? Matthew 5:13. You'll notice that I've entitled the sermon today, Salty Christians. It didn't come out quite that way. S-Alti, A-L-T-I. I don't know quite how the secretary got that from my handwriting, but then if you saw my handwriting, you'd know exactly how she got that. It's Salty Christians. You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trodden underfoot by men. Let's take a little look at that. You are the salt of the earth. One of the things that Jesus had a great power to do is to make each and every one of us look at ourselves. Not that he is, or she is, or somebody else is, but the pointed finger directly at each and every one of us. You are the salt of the earth. Every single one of you. The responsibility of the Christian church and the responsibility for the growth of the Christian church is not dependent upon organizations. They're the same thing in the business world. Systems never work. People do. Systems only enable people to work a little better. But it is people that do things. Churches never work. People do. It is people who make things work. All of the guilt and all of the G-I-L-D, all of the things that go around to make everything look so beautiful has no impact if it is not the recognition of each and every member of the children of God, the kingdom of God, that it's an individual thing every day. You, not me. You. Me too, yes. On the same individual basis. You are the salt of the earth. Let's take a look at salt. Salt's a funny thing. Too much of it puts the blood pressure up. Too little of it puts the blood pressure down and you got problems. You need salt. Salt is something which has a tremendous opportunity working within the body to provide harmony and balance. Like many things, too much of it's no good and too little is no good, but you've got to get the harmony and balance. That fits very nicely with what we've been talking about in terms of the Beatitudes. Joy and happiness comes with the harmony and balance of being debonair, of being warm, of being together. And the salt is that which helps provide the balance. But salt was one of the most important things in the ancient world. Several verses in the Talmud, several writings from the Greeks indicate that salt was worth its weight in gold, pure salt. So there was not only a recognition in many of the hot countries that you needed salt, but salt was used as a preservative. And part of what I think that the Christian church and what you, as the salt of the world, have a challenge, according to the teachings of Jesus, is that you are the one who, when people shout hate, say, no, I will provide balance and love. When people say, we have a right to, you say, no, we have the opportunity to. What a difference. What a difference if we can convince people that in their own lives it is not a right of, but an opportunity to reach out and to do and to be challenged. And the salty Christians are those who bring that kind of harmony and balance, but also preserve that which is worth preserving. Salt also can sting, and it can heal. There are times when the salty Christian has to speak on issues which are difficult to speak upon. And like salt rubbed into the wound, which ultimately helps in the healing process but causes great pain. There are times when the Christian church and individual Christians have to make stands that are not popular with the world, that go against what the world has been saying, not only as part of their balance, but also as part of their healing and their reconciliation. They have to speak at times with the kind of pain that causes people to look deep down within themselves and say, oh Lord, forgive me. But which one of us has not done that which we need forgiveness of? That is healing Reconciliation is the Christian term. Bringing together and helping to make better and rooting out the evil in our lives, in our society, in our corporations, in our country, in our relationships, however you want to spell it out, even though at times it might be painful. But always bearing in mind that the purpose is not to cause pain, the purpose is not to cause anger, the purpose is not to hurt, the purpose is not to make something other than just heal. It is the healing ministry of the church which is recognized here. So you're the salt of the world. You preserve. You're the salt of the world. You bring a little spice to it. Lord, deliver me from long-faced Christians. Happy Christians are bad enough sometimes. But long-faced Christians, oh, I am so happy. Listen, you got to be spicy, in the best sense of the word. You got to be so full of zest and joy that you bring happiness. Salt is something which adds a little something to the stew or the meat or the apple or the banana or whatever you put your salt on, the egg. It takes something which can be very dull and makes it positive. And one of the things that we have in our whole concept of Christianity is that it's a do-not religion. That is not true. Categorically, it is not true. Christianity is not a religion that forbids, it's a religion that challenges us constantly to move forward in positive ways. It is a positive religion. It is a happy religion. It is a religion that promises, as you read through the Beatitudes day after day, and I hope you're doing it. Read the Beatitudes every day for a month until it becomes such a part of you that as you are acting out your own lives, as you are trying to conceive of who you are and what you are, you can't help but allow them to work through your lives, and you will find it is a positive thing. Happy, 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 happy. Not in some sort of a giddy way, but with thoughts and zest, so that you can find the meaning and the humor and all the things that are behind it and pull it together. You're the salt of the earth. But salt's used in one other way. In the ancient world, they used to plow up the fields and put salt in it because ground which has a lot of salt in it will not produce food. Plants cannot grow. And there are salted Christians around who would like to destroy, not build, not be positive, who are always negative in what they're doing, and their concept is destructive. Because if we follow them, we will ultimately be turning not fields to growing the lilies that Jesus talked about, but to growing nothing. Now, but if salt has lost its taste, salt never loses its taste, supposedly. The fact of the matter is that we all have had salt that's lost its taste. In the summertime, even with all of the things to keep the salt running, when the moisture gets up there, you keep adding more and more, and you say to yourself, finally, you done that? And you pour the salt out, because when it gets to a point where the moisture and all breaks it down, that it's not really doing what it wants to do, you don't have the taste. What good is it? Just throw it out. Unless you need the psychological thing of putting salt on, which some of us do. We ruin good cooks. Don't you hate it? You really work hard to have a meal, and the first thing when somebody comes and grabs the salt, takes and goes all over the table, all over everything else, just scatters it every which way. The salt loses its taste. The saltiness can't be restored. It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trodden underfoot by men. The story is told of a merchant who hoarded great bags of salt because, as I said, salt was like gold. And he put them in a storeroom and left them there until such a time as he thought he could sneak them out bit by bit so the tax collectors wouldn't be able to catch them. And he was very, very clever, except the moisture of the room and the ground began to work up through, and the salt solidified and began to absorb moisture and lost its solidity. And afterwards it was good for nothing, and it had to be thrown out. And it was trampled down on the road and survived the base. There's a challenge there. It's not just salt that we're talking about. What happens when you lose your faith? What happens when you lose your purpose and direction in life? What happens when you lose your core value system? What happens when you lose the ability to be a salty Christian? What happens when the pulpit is turned into a pulpit of hate and the Christian church is turned into a church of hate? What happens when a pastor of 12 years in a Lutheran church in Germany becomes a member of the SS, the slaughter squad that moved to Poland, putting to death under his command over 100,000 people? Reconciliation becomes possible. And Jesus doesn't talk about it here because I think he's challenging each and every one of us. But the beauty of what Jesus is talking about is that we can be reconciled. There can be forgiveness. There can be hope. Unlike the salt, which is lost its savor and can be thrown out, our savor can be put back in. Savor, not savior. Our savor can be put back in. There can be a reconciliation between us and God and individuals to the point that wholeness is restored. And because of the love of God working actively in our lives, we begin to once again become what we ought to be. Well, you're the salt of the earth. It's up to you. Somebody asks you how you are tomorrow, I say, I'm a salty Christian and I'm doing fine. They'll probably eyes pop open and they'll take you on nuts or something like that, but it'd be kind of interesting to see what they would do. I'm fantastic. I'm salty today. I'm full of the Spirit, and I'm ready to go. I'm reading out of the King James now for a reason. Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. I read that particularly because this is one of the problems. In the ancient world, there were no candlesticks. In the ancient world, there were no candles. One of the reasons we talk about constantly having a re-translation of the Bible is that we're becoming much more aware of what the Bible means. In King James times, there were candlesticks. But in the ancient world, if you read in your Bible, you find they're talking about lamps, those clay lamps that you've seen, that I brought over and showed you. Those clay lamps that had olive oil in them and a little wick, and they were lit. And they were put not on a candlestick, but on a lampstand, so that they could show up and light up the whole room. Not like our bright lights, not like our spotlights, but there was a gentle glow that enabled people to see themselves around the darkness of the room. Now, you're not only the salt, but you're the beacon. You're the light. Let's take a look at light. Light has many things. It can show the way both to and from. The imagery here is that a city can't be put up on a hill and mist. Those of you who have been to Jerusalem, and a number of this congregation today have, will remember that as you're heading up, the city stands out. No way. You've all seen pictures across the valley looking at the old city of Jerusalem with the golden dome now of the mosque. And you cannot in any manner, shape, or form miss that. A city that's up on a hill is going to be seen. You can't look around and not see it. A light's the same way. Now, a light can provide a beacon heading out, a direction, so that you know which way you're going. And I think that ties in very nicely with the salt and all of the other things. You provide a direction in the world for people to know where they're going. A corrective. Wait. Remember when we did the business on the 23rd Psalm? Thy rod and thy staff. We got one up here and the other back here. It's moving along, but moving in the right direction. And when the sheep begin to move out of the way, the shepherd reaches over and taps them and brings them back in. Oh, the way sometimes can be wide and sometimes can be narrow. It's the shepherd who's sort of aware of that, but at the same time, there's a control of the direction in which we're going. Direction is the key of these few verses. You're the light of the world. You not only provide the direction in which we're going, but you also provide a refuge. I don't know if you've ever gotten lost. You probably have. It doesn't matter whether you're a kid and were lost out playing and suddenly got dark, or whether you've been out driving somewhere or what. But if you've gotten lost, what is the one thing you look for? The light. Somehow or another, a light, a beacon, a ray of hope we call it. There's a way to go, and there's some place there that you can go and see what's happening. We've all done it. We've all felt the relief of seeing the candle, the light in the window. And part of what I think Christianity is all about, and part of the challenge to each and every one of us, is to be that light, that ray, that provides a place for people to come home to. Now I'm talking down home. My Southern Baptist background comes out at this point, but I like it. It's down home. It's a ray. It's a way for people who, because of the way things are going on, as we can see, and the way we're living our lives, see something about us that causes each and every one of them to say, I wish I had that. I wonder how God could work through my life. That's what the ray is all about. And what does it say there? Let your light so shine, they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Do any of you know the term Marranos? Marranos were a Jewish group in Spain who, under the Inquisition, had to put the externals of Christianity on, but lived internally as Jews. It was an external thing forced upon them. They remained faithful to the faith, but they had to act out like they were Christians. When you look at this whole passage, there are an awful lot of Marranos in the world today who will put the inside and say, I'm a Christian on the inside, but I live on the outside, what? And then each one of us has to begin to understand it. I think there's an awful lot of people who live on the outside in a very pagan way, but in the inside they say, gee, I'm a Christian, I really am. The challenge is that the inner man and outer man have got to be one. You can't live on the inside something that you don't live on the outside. And if you're living it on the outside, take a hard look at yourselves on the inside. One quick last one. Think not that I have come to abolish the law and the prophets in verse 17. I have come not to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, not a jot or a tittle, an iota or a dot will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Whoever then relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches men so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But he who does them and teaches them shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. I think there's an inner harmony here. We begin with the last. Your righteousness exceeds that. Scribes and the Pharisees were amazing people, and I do not want to in any manner, shape, or form take the limited view of them that is oftentimes found in the New Testament. There were people who struggled with religion and life, but there were in that group, as with every group, people who had the external ability to go through what was required, but not the internal ability to put it into their heart. It's possible to give 10% of your earnings and say, I've done that which needs to be done, and not to live any differently. Not to change within yourself. Not to permit the kind of power that is necessary working through you. To stand up and say, I'm a good man, look at all the good things I do, but to have the corruption that's deep down inside is the external thing that Jesus is talking about here. You don't need to be righteous in the sense of the external. You need to be righteous in the sense of the internal, and then let that shine through. But there's also something here too. We have a tendency to talk about the Old Testament and the New Testament as though the Old Testament was gone. But Jesus says that nothing which has been talked about in what we call the Old Testament is going to be passing away until it is fulfilled totally and completely. I take that very seriously as I do all of this. As I seek to understand in my own life. I think it's one of the keys to understanding not only within me, but within the Christian church, the need to take a hard look at Judaism and what's happened to Judaism and where it is. Because there's a promise here from Jesus that these things will be fulfilled, and the covenants made with God by the people of God and with God will be fulfilled, because it has to be. And he did not come to take away the smallest letter, the yod, the iota, a small letter in the Greek. He didn't come to take away that. He didn't come to take away little dots and little things on it. He came to fulfill. It is a positive statement of God in life and of Jesus' purpose to fulfill the prophets and the righteousness that they speak about. To fulfill the need to move evermore. It's bad enough to move away and to break. even the smallest of the commandments. But you know what's worse is to teach others to do so. Think about that. It's one thing for each and every one of us to say, I failed. Forgiveness. But there's something else about that. Those who teach failure have a bragging about them. They not only have failed, but they're proud of their failure. And you know people like this. My nature. I can't do anything else. This is the way I am. I know it's wrong, but that's the way I am. That's a pride and failure that ought to be kicked right out. Because what that is doing is teaching failure, moral failure, physical failure, business failure, all kinds of failures, but ultimately a breaking of the law of God. It's human to fail, true. But why do we focus on that and justify it? It's also human to succeed. And what I see in these verses, which are pulled together and which work very nicely together, is an emphasis upon the success in life, where God, working through each one of us, causes not only within ourselves our core value system to consistently and constantly to grow and become more solidified so that we know who we are, and what we stand for, but a challenge to be salty, to bring about a light into the world, to challenge other people to not only come unto, but to give them guidance and direction in what they're doing. What we find at this point is that God tries for each and every one of us to strengthen us, not only in our resolve, but our ability to serve Him.